Welcome to Owl About Games, a podcast where we talk about all different aspects of board games, from design to mechanics to board game news, including updates and information for games from Open Owl Studios. I'm your host, Natalie, and I'm joined by Brendan. So sit back, relax, and let's talk Owl About Games.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, hello.
All right, so we are back with another episode of Owl About Games. I'm Natalie. I'm joined by Brendan, and we have a special guest with us today.
Yeah, hi.
We have
I'm glad to be here.
Sjoerd, and we're doing the Storyfold episode.
Okay, first of all, Sjoerd, I think I butcher your name every time I say it. So can you educate us in some good old Dutch pronunciation of how to say your name, and then we'll go on saying your name like we do, but maybe we'll get it we'll get it right.
Well, well, you're not the first one who has a problem with the name. It's a very Dutch name. It's Sjoerd. And I think the best way I sort of explain it, it's like Stuart without the first T. So more like Sjoerd.
Sjoerd.
But I listen to Shirt or Shard or Shoot. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. Hey, so as Natalie talked about, thanks for being here, everyone. We are going to do a deep dive on Storyfold Wildwoods. We can all hold up our nice little boxes. We all got our coffee. You can see it's nice on Natalie's calyx. Very exciting. Very exciting. We are going to do a deep dive, but before doing any of that, I tried to say your name properly, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Sjoerd, can you give us a quick description of what Storyfold Wildwoods is, and then we'll rewind and do a deep dive from the beginning?
Yeah. No, sure. So Storyfold is a narrative adventure game for one player, in which you play as a young girl called Luma and her bear Brom, who set out to heal the forest, the Wildwoods, from a mysterious shadow. And it uses a storybook. And in that storybook, when you unfold it, you have basically a dashboard that has been specifically designed to be as immersive as possible for the solo player. And by using cards and dice and snippets of story, you continue through, or you play your way through the book, through a lot of different scenes, and they progress into chapters, into a full-on campaign.
Yeah, and one of the most, it's a great game. One of the most striking things to me when I initially saw it was the storybook, and we're going to get into the storybook and the dashboard that it creates. This is an interesting one for Open Owl Studios, because typically we have never had an external designer submit a game for us to publish. We have always kind of incubated our own ideas, and then we'll either design it internally or kind of go find external designers and kind of bring them in and work on the ideas. But there was something so striking about the original kind of vision of the game, and I want to kind of step back and go there. So was it a year ago? And not quite a year ago, but we signed at Essen. Yeah,
it's like a year ago now. Yeah.
I guess a year ago you sent the email, I think, to us and a few other publishers like a year ago. Maybe you can kind of rewind the clock a little bit and tell us first maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, and then where's the inspiration for starting the crazy journey of board game design?
Yeah. So maybe good to point out is that I'm a first-time designer. So my background is I'm an archaeologist by trade, specialized in sort of fabricating or constructing or conveying stories about the past. And after that, I've worked for a long time as an exhibition designer, a concept designer for exhibitions. And I've been well, I think as all of us, a big time board game enthusiast ever since I opened my first box of Hero Quest in the 80s. And yeah, uh, and I live in the Netherlands, in the beach with my wife and two daughters. And yeah, so I think I've always dabbled in game design, but it was mainly a thing for myself and for my friends, and I never brought it much further than that. And then about 2 years ago, I started work on Storyfold. And my main inspiration is that I've always been very captivated by games that where theme and story and mechanics are really well integrated, and where you really get sucked into the narrative and into the experience. And what I wanted to do is to sort of make my version of that, but then really try to make it as an immersive experience as possible, in order to create a story that really grab you. And a couple of years ago, I really started to get into solo games or cooperative games, and I felt that there was a lot of design space, specifically in that solo genre, that I think would be very good to explore and to lean into. So um, I wanted to develop a game which would really lean into that sort of into the story and into the immersion that would you get. So the whole unfolding of the book and the dashboard is really there to set you up as a solo player, even though you can play it with two people on the side. And um, another big inspiration for me that I should mention is that when I became a dad, I have two daughters called Lune and May, and I wanted to tell a story with this that was, even though I like dungeon crawls, etc., but I wanted to tell a story that was much more deep and personal and intimate and much more like the old fairy tales, and something that they could relate to as well. And and all of that came together in developing this game. Since then, it's been a crazy ride because I, 2 years ago, I entered into a Swedish.
Okay, wait. Let's pause. Let's pause there because I do want to pick up on that. Because I think there's some fun moments. But we've been talking a lot about the story book. So Natalie, could you switch over to the image of the book? I think it's okay. Great. Hey, we got a cool. Oh wait, let's back up. Let's just appreciate this box.
This one.
No, oh no, back even
A
more.
box.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
box. For those of you, we don't have the back, but you have this like beautiful spine as well. And then the next one shows this magnetic flip. The next image.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, there it is. So there's a magnet on the top. It opens up, and then you can skip ahead to the book. Great. So here's the book. You can't quite tell in this image, but right now we're thinking it's around 80 pages. And if you go to the next page, it actually opens up. And I think now's actually probably the perfect time to show the trailer, because we haven't shown the trailer yet.
Yeah.
So let's pause here. Let's show the trailer, and then we'll pick up this conversation.
All right.
So that's good. We can skip ahead to the main kind of overview image. I think it's the next one actually.
Yeah.
That's great. So Sjoerd, take us through a little bit of what we're seeing here, and your kind of original vision, and then how it's kind of morphed over the year, or over I guess the past year into this.
Yeah. So I think I think what we're looking at here is sort of a further developed version of the vision, but I think the original vision still stands, and I
Yeah.
think that's one of the nice things to work on it as a team. I think underlying this are some very strong concepts, and I think these have been the same over the whole development. So yeah, so what you're looking here is, as you could see in the trailer, actually it starts with opening the box and that magnetic lips, and then you take out this book and you open up the first page, and then you have these two sort of dashboards and there's a big of story into that, like a
Hmm.
teaser trailer within the book itself, almost an introduction, and you flip that open, and to the left and to the right here, what you see is basically your player dashboard, um, and that holds everything in place that you need for the game. So you've got all your deck of cards go in there, um, and then in the middle, what you're looking at here is is one of the scenes that you could play through. So here, this is actually the first scene of chapter 1. Um, and what you need to do in this game is, by using different action cards, and they are below the book, you're playing through one of these scenes, and they take about 30 minutes to play. And when you sort of bring forward that scene of when you've won that scene, the game moves forward, and you flip it over to the next page where you get another scene with a piece of story. And from scene to scene, you're playing through the story. But it's not just as linear as that, because you can also lose a scene, and then the shadow progresses the story. So in the middle, what you see here is, this is basically one game session that you're looking at, and when you finish this, you can continue playing to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one. So it's really like um, a series of scenes that make up different chapters. In total, there's 5 chapters that tell the whole story. Um, yeah.
No,
What else to
that's
say?
good. And
Hours.
yeah, no, I'll jump in here. So, um, you have this dashboard. You have a bunch of cards. You have story cards happening kind of on this left dashboard, along with with Luma and Brahm. Um, One of the things that strikes me the most about the gameplay, and we'll get into the people who are testing the game right now, but uh, it's a solo game, and as you start playing, whenever you choose an action card, you pull it towards you. You'll roll a set number of dice to see if how many successes you get of that action. Then you'll perform kind of all the things you need in order to complete the scene, to get different boons, to kind of like upgrade your character a little bit, give you special kind of one-time use powers and stuff. But you get into this really cool flow where it's called the river, and so as I'll let you explain it better, but as you use a card, it goes to the end of the river, and then everything else shifts down, and so you get this real neat mechanic where you're using an action, but then it moves to the end of the river, which makes it harder to use, or maybe you can't use it until you take care of some of these creatures and stuff. So Sjoerd, maybe touch base on the river and how it's just like a fundamental kind of core design of Storyfold.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're talking basically about flow here, and for me, flow was a very important design element of the game. So I wanted to make something that would flow naturally, also with the movement of your hands, and the way you think. And story-wise, Luma follows the river, but the river also um, is this set of cards below the scene here. So you've got 4 action cards. There's Explore, Help, Light, and Heal. And all of these action cards have 2 abilities, a top and a bottom. Um, and whenever you activate these actions with rolling your dice, and the one most to the left is easier to activate than the one next to that, or the one next to that, or the one next to that. So they're not impossible, but every time you use it, as you said, it goes to the back of the river. So what you get is you start to get this. You really have to manage your different kind of actions in sort of a push your luck strategic kind of way. And then these creatures, they come and mess about with your river, but basically with your available actions. And if you don't heal them on time, they stay there and they sort of attack you and disrupt you. So it's what you get into is this flow of action management basically, and trying to keep your river as effective as possible, because you need to do a lot of things simultaneously. You need to explore the scene. You need to ask certain creatures for help to do things. You need to keep up your spirit. You need to heal creatures. You need to bring light to the forest, and all of that is, yes, a sort of a resource management thing almost going on. And I think that flow of the river gives a lot of design space. Is at the core of the game. Yeah.
And something that surprised me when I played it for the first time, there's a scene, and I forget whether it was a scene of snakes or rats. I think it might have been like the rat scene.
Yeah.
These rats, every turn they keep on coming into your river, and you're trying to get rid of them, but they keep on coming, and they kind of are invading your actions, and Luma herself. And it's one of those interesting like circumstances where the gameplay itself, right, the act of these creatures going into the river is actually telling a story, right, as they get kind of closer and closer. And that for me is, it was an impressive thing, because there's a lot of storytelling going on here. You know, there's the visual storytelling, there's storytelling through written narrative, but then there's also this like kind of gameplay storytelling that is happening as well, which is really special.
Yeah, the rats
Yeah,
actually.
like I'd also say.
Please, Natalie, go.
Oh, okay. Like I was gonna say, just when I also first play tested it, it's the river mechanic. It's almost like a meditative kind of gameplay that you're going through, because like the river, the actions are just flowing, but when you're interrupted by a creature and you know it's like coming at you and you can see it, but it's also like thematically still in line with the story and with the scene, and how the mechanics all mimic like going with the story and how you would move through things as well. So I mean, like it's a relaxing experience, but at the same time, like a very thoughtful puzzle of trying to be as efficient as possible with your action cards while playing with the creatures, like the rats, like the rats being like annoying little creatures, but they just keep coming back, sort of thing, right? So it's like everything so far that I've even seen just works so well at everything. And again, with the push your luck, there's always ways to try to mitigate that as well, which I found important, but I'm sure we'll get to that later.
No, thanks. No, I think you're right actually. And so I mean, the creatures is just one of the elements here, but I tried to, for me it was very important that mechanics and story and art always basically have to build out of the same concept. So for rats, for instance, I thought, what's the most annoying thing that a rat can do? And actually, rat is coming back, but it's also stealing your dice. And I thought that would just be the most annoying rat-like thing to do. And you can sort of ignore that one, for instance, but at a certain point, you really want your dice back. So that's just an example of the rats. But there are, I mean, there's loads of creatures. There's snakes and foxes and birds.
So
and,
let's
I mean, all the creatures you have in the forest, basically.
So I'm gonna get us back to the gameplay in a section. And I know Daniel on Facebook asked a great question about the replayability of the game as a narrative game, and I want to circle. So we'll pause it. I don't want to answer that quite yet. Know that is there, but I want to circle back on that. Before we do, Natalie, if you can switch, just go on over to some of the artwork images. And I want to just spend a moment again. For those of you who didn't see, I had balloons that showed up. I don't know why the computer has decided to do this. So, first of all, we have this incredible French artist, Justine Chalot. I think I said her name wrong, but she has done all the artwork in Wildwoods, and we're like we've been thrilled with her artwork. She has such a good eye, and this is an example of one of the scenes. So uh, maybe we can tackle two things at the same time here, Sjoerd. You can tell us a little bit about the Wildwoods, the concept, kind of the narrative backbone of the Wildwoods, and then how does that play out in this artwork? And obviously there's these red. For those of you who don't see this scene, we kind of got this this kind of profile scene of this dark forest with these creatures, and then there's these red wisps that are around some of these creatures as well. So maybe you can give us a little explainer on the narrative
Yeah.
backbone of Wildwoods, and then how it plays out in the art.
Yeah. So story-wise, the Wildwoods is so Luma and Brom. They live at the edge of the forest, and at a certain point, this is not really a spoiler because it happens right at the beginning. They get a call to get into the Wildwoods because it's been basically under the influence of the shadow. And while she goes into the forest, she has to heal the forest and heal the creatures that are there and bring light to it, and also solve a kind of a mystery, which is a very personal, intimate kind of mission of facing your own fears, etc. And so the way first we translated it into art, and this has been there from the beginning. I thought that there's a lot of good games that use uh, even adventure books and storybooks or dungeon crawls, but most of them have the sort of top-down view.
Yeah.
Or they have great art, but it's just tiny on a card itself. And I really wanted to have art play a huge role. And the best way to do it is we thought is to have the art from the side. So you're really sort of looking at Luma and Brom sort of going through the forest. Um, so gameplay wise, you're always working your way from left to right. So for instance, here you don't see the actions based on it. It is just the background art of it, but you have to first go into the forest. For instance, here there's some snakes there. Deal with the snakes, then investigate this. Well, I don't know what it is. It looks like a deer. It could be a vision. Who knows? Um, so the art here. I mean, everything at the art is relates to certain locations and actions that you need to do, or sometimes there's a location in this artwork where you can ask help for a creature. So this side view of the art is really sort of supporting that gameplay. And the other thing that you're looking at here is this sort of silhouette art, and that has been inspired, uh, yeah, from the prototype. It was basically a limitation of my own Photoshop skills. So I thought, well, I could do that. And then Justine and Taryn just dialed it up to 11 in this amazing art. And so you've got the light, which is stands for Luma and the bear, and then the red is the shadows, and everything black is basically just the natural world. And it's the Wildwoods is a kind of a mix between a real fairy tale place and more like a metaphorical place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Can we flip over to some of the creature card art? Because I think there's something fun about this, and you can't see it, but well, if you can't see it, there's these names of creatures like the cry. I'm gonna butcher the names, but I'm gonna say them. The
Oh, that was good.
flatter the adder, the Vos, and the Voldark. What's so this, we've talked about this, but I'm gonna put on the hey, I don't know what's going on here. Is this like, are these Dutch names of different forest creatures? Are these mythological names? What's going on here with the naming of the creatures?
Yeah. So partly related to the fact that it was inspired and made for my daughters, but also it I felt like I wanted the forest to have this because that's where I live, the sort of northwestern European Dutch kind of old fairy tale vibe to it. So the words that you see here are either Dutch, like a kraai is a crow, or they're sort of old Dutch, or they're sort of fairy tale invented Dutch, where Dutch starts to mix with German and Danish and what have you not. And it's been there since the beginning. And during a lot of playtests, the feedback has always been like, "Oh, that's interesting." And I think because you always see the silhouettes of the art with it, it's obvious what it is. But so a lot of the creatures and the sort of um, some of the locations have this sort of old Dutch vibe to them. Yeah.
For me, I like it just because if it just read crow or boar on the card, right? It I don't know. Like when I read like cry, I'm like, oh, it just evokes something. Oh, this is some sort of mythological story. Like we're entering into a narrative here, right? So it's even just the naming convention of the creatures, because it's at least to us Westerners, right? There's a level of like foreignness to like how the words are said or how they're pronounced that actually makes you think a little bit more about, oh, hey, what is this? What is it doing here? And I think that's great. I know there was a point of time you've asked a number of times, not a number, but a couple, where it's like, hey, should we change the names? Should we like do something? I'm like, no, let's not change these names. They're too good. So that's great. The story is incredible. The artwork's fantastic. I want to circle back on Daniel's question, and feel free to bring up whatever image you want, Natalie,
All right.
even if it's just the cover. But I want to spend just a little bit of our time speaking about the structure of the narrative. So as Sjoerd mentioned, each scene, when you're sitting down to play a game of Storyfold or a session, you're going to play through a number of scenes. You can choose as many scenes as you want, but a single scene. Sjoerd mentioned 30 minutes, but it's actually, I would say, 30 to 60 minutes, because the designer always plays it about twice as fast as the average human. And so in our testing, we're like 30 to 60 minutes for a single scene. And then about 3 of those scenes make up a chapter. And so you're looking at around 10 to 15 hours of kind of campaign story. Maybe before we get into, we can talk about like, hey, what are the ways that this campaign evolves as you play, and how does replayability kind of like thread itself through the core of the campaign as well.
Right. Yeah. So maybe one. So there's 5 chapters, as you said, and before that there's actually a prologue, a tutorial chapter that we probably get into to later as well. Um, but because of the storybook and the way it folds, and these sort of the way you set it up and fold it away are very quick. But the way the whole narrative flows is basically every chapter is one big chapter in an overarching story of Luma and Brom getting into the story, and I can't spoil too much, but of getting into this adventure. And every chapter takes place in a certain location and is divided up in certain scenes. Not just so there's 3 to 4 scenes per chapter that you play to, but there's also some setup scenes and different endings of that scene. And when you play through a scene, depending on how you play, the story evolves in different ways, and it's not in this sort of choose your own adventure kind of style where you make it a choice on a card. But actually, there are some cards with story, but it's your actions and the way you play that define how you progress a scene. So, for instance, you can win a scene or lose a scene, and depending on how that goes, you get different pieces of story, or you get different creatures that you might encounter, or you might not solve anything, or be sort of swept away by grief or sorrow, and then you take this with you. And then every chapter has also different endings. So there's always like a win kind of ending that progresses the story, and there's like a fill forward ending that progresses the story with a different piece of story and scene to that. Or there's always an ending where you don't continue and you have to set it up again. And then depending on how you played, you might get certain boons and banes or companion cards going into your deck, and you bring these with you and these cards
Yes.
start to change the story as well. So there's a lot of different ways in which the story branches and becomes replayable in that sense.
Like a real quick example that's not spoiling anything. There's a scene, I think it's in the first chapter, where you have an opportunity to help out this little woodland creature, and if you do so, you get this companion that it will follow you, and I don't know where it goes afterwards, but you get this thing, and it's not a choice of saying, do you help the creature or not? It's like it's a result of an action that you don't actually know necessarily the outcome of the action is going to be that, but it's this, you're choosing to do this action. You're spending some of your action dice, and then there's these results, and those are kind of like littered throughout that ultimately change how you play and how you experience it as well.
Yeah. No, correct. And the opposite of that is that sometimes you encounter some things that are really dark and emotional for Luma, and then you bring these sort of memories with you into the forest as well. And these can haunt you at certain points in the adventure or change some of the scenes in the adventure as well. Yeah.
So Yada Yada, love the name on you. I asked a question, and I wanted to ask because somebody else had mentioned this game. So their question was there any inspiration from Isla and Something Shiny? I didn't know what this game was until I Googled it. Sjoerd, do you know this game?
I had to look it up as well, and it's on my playlist as well.
We've never
So
played it.
Yeah,
no,
I heard a lot of this at our Gen Con thing where this was maybe one of the number one things people were saying, like, oh, is it inspired? And it's like, no, there was definitely it seemed like there was not. They just happened to both be solo stories that you're going through. So
yeah, I looked it up, and what I immediately uh, I think mechanic-wise, it's quite different, but it has a certain
yeah,
feel to it, like this intimate kind of story feel. It seems to have a lot of soul, that game,
Mm.
without having played it. And I think, yeah, Storyfold Wildwoods is trying to capture the same kind of mood, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some element of I think maybe the theme is reminiscent a little bit, even though the tone looks very different.
yeah,
And yeah, but looks like a cool game on the to do
yeah.
list of playing it.
Yeah, like, I haven't
So
played it, but
okay.
I think the similarities was mostly that it's a single player story that you're going through, and you're going through a book, and you have cards, but other than that, I find this, like, both of them fairly unique outside of just those common points, and I guess the way that people tend to, categorize or label new things is trying to attach it to something that they're similar to, right? So,
Yeah.
it's that is about as far as I think the similarity goes with the 2, but, I mean, I like this, but I got to see this one in person so far and play it, so
There you go. Uh, so yeah, the campaign, it begins with a prologue, plays over 5 chapters. There is an increasing level of complexity in the chapters. And I know we don't want to kind of get into it because there's a lot of like spoilery territory, but I think the best way to indicate this is right now we have a group of alpha testers who I think just got access to the game on Monday or Tuesday. And a bunch of them have been playing through the game in our Discord channel. If you're curious about signing up, you can go to our blog, and you can sign up there. But it's something that we are trying with this game is giving people a prologue deck of cards that teaches you how to play. And we're still going to have a rule book. The rule book will be in there, but a question for us, like pretty early on, is like, hey, can somebody pick up this game off the shelf, open it up, take one pack of cards, and just start playing the game? Because for me, one of my least favorite experiences, and I know a lot of board gamers like this, but for me, least favorite experience is opening up a game and you see all these beautiful components and you want to play it, but then you're forced to read like a technical document. And something that it's crazy, but I think it actually works. Because right now, all of our testers, they don't have access to a rule book. They're literally just learning to play with the prologue. And that's not to say that the game isn't like to use like a BGG like weight. It's not to say that the game is like really lightweight, because it's actually not. There's a level of complexity, but something that I think Storyfold does really well is take a good cue from video games, where video games, they do the best in teaching you how to play because they layer mechanics and ideas over the course of you playing. Whenever you start a video game, you don't like how you play it is not how you play it in hour 10, right? And Storyfold does that very similarly, where in the prologue we're layering on ideas, and then Sjoerd, as the game goes on, even scene by scene and then chapter by chapter, there's ideas and kind of different complications that get layered on more. I don't know if you have anything to say to that, Sjoerd, but for me, it's been a standout plus of what we've been doing.
Yeah. No, I think so as well. I mean, when you first mentioned that we were going to do the tutorial, I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea, but also a big challenge. But the feedback has been good, and what I like about it is that immediately when you open the game, you start playing, and it doesn't just tell you what to do, but you're actually already part of this. So the prologue tutorial already is sort of bringing the story a little bit forward. And after that, I think, well, it looks like it. People can play. They do. They play chapter 1, and
Yep.
so if the added complexity from chapter to chapter, it's a lot of it is sort of done by building on concepts and mechanics that you already know, that you don't need any more rules to. There's only a couple of things maybe at the beginning of chapter, like, hey, this is a tiny bit of extra rule for this chapter. But almost everything is already there right from the beginning. And it doesn't mean, maybe important to say, that there won't be a rule book, because
Oh no, there
will
will be a rule book, and even Eric,
Yeah.
Eric just mentioned this in the chat. Yeah, we plan on having a complete rule book. But the idea is, can you get into the game quickly, right? And I think we've accomplished that.
And I will say, as someone who I ended up being like a guinea pig of trying this game without a rule book at all as well, and kind of like hidden from the mechanics and everything about playing the game, and tried it out a few weeks ago. And the prologue was immersive, and as you were following it through, it went well. I didn't have access to the rule books, but then once I got into chapter 1, and you just have the reference cards, so there are reference cards as well, it went fairly smoothly with like, oh, I really did end up getting all the concepts I needed to go to continue playing this game. But also, if I wanted access to the rule book, there is the rule book to do it like your regular way, as someone who usually needs a rule book, needs to watch playthrough, and then gets to play the game. But the other thing as well, when you were speaking about video games, it's like it is also innovative in that sense, that I wondered if there was any influence from video games while you were designing the game.
Well, that's a really fun thing, because a lot of people, I don't play video games. I love them, but I'm just really bad with. And it's every time I do it, I'm like, where's the round button? Where's the square button? But I'm fascinated by them, and I look at the trailers, and I watch other people play, and it has been inspired by it, in a sense, like I think it's called a platformer. I mean, but there's sort of this side view of where you go from left to right. I mean, that is something that I was inspired by without having played a lot of these video games.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like the story
And the other,
ones, like there was like Heavy Rain where it's just you pick an action and it's a choose your own story. So there's not as much action in it. And that's kind of what this game also made me think about, and was also one comment that I remember someone who saw the game also made. Um
Mm.
so very
Yeah,
neat.
so oh yeah, it has been inspired. Well, without having played
Yeah.
these games, and
Yeah.
what I hear and see is that, and what I like about video games is this. I think it looks like they're doing a really good job of pulling you in, and it's a medium that where people accept that you can play it as a single player. And I thought, well, if you get an analog version of that, then maybe you can sort of create the same level of mechanics and immersion and sort of narrative depth from that medium. So it has been inspired by that, but
Yeah.
based upon looking at it from a distance, I suppose.
Yeah, I love it. So just to put a bow on Daniel's question about replayability, we've talked about a lot. The game itself is like, I I think it's I
Replayable.
don't want to say this, but I think I love the story. I love the artwork. I love the immersion of it. I think the game is just so fun that people would just enjoy playing through the game over and over, because there's just like a real meditative flow, but also like a puzzly challenge. So that's incredible. So we have a lot of replayability through the campaign, through the narrative and the choices, the actions you do, how it reflects all that different stuff. But I'm not going to get into it too much because it's still under development. One thing we are working on is something like a kind of new game plus mode, so like a small kind of pack of like modifiers, or like these kind of an extra level of challenge, where if you want to play through again and you want to kind of like, hey, am I like really good at this, you can kind of introduce it into your subsequent playthroughs. And so that's all I'm going to say about that, because you'll find out more at our Kickstarter. Speaking of which, what a segue, Brendan. I segued so well to our Kickstarter. We are going to just a couple brief things about the upcoming Kickstarter. First things first, it is sometime this fall. So our definition of fall is September to November. So sometime this fall. You'll know when it launches. We'll obviously have an announcement date. A couple
Yeah, it
weeks
won't be
beforehand.
hidden information.
No, it won't be hidden. So sometime this fall is when we're launching. We will go live with two versions of the game. By versions, I mean we'll have a retail version and we'll have a deluxe version. The retail version is pretty incredible because the retail version is what we all currently have, and it's cool. There's a lot of like I honestly love it. Stands on its own, and but there's as we talked
Fits in the
about, hey,
calyx.
yeah, it fits in the calyx. As we talk about, hey, like what could like make the experience not just immersive in all of its things, but like the components, how can you like level. So we have some really interesting ideas for how we're going to kind of package a deluxe kind of it'll be kind of Kickstarter exclusive version of the game, and that will be at the same time. And I'm trying to think if there's other announcements other than that. I'm trying to think. Sjoerd, is there any other elements of Storyfold Wildwoods that would be helpful to mention? I recognize that we've been live for like 45 minutes, so I wanted to draw us to a close. But any standout features or highlights or kind of areas, topics that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, maybe just to highlight, we've talked a lot about the river and the actions, but we haven't talked a lot about Luma and Brom and the shadow. So
Yeah.
at the left side of it, I think it's so the relationship between Luma and Brom, her bear, is an important one in the story, and I think one that is really, yeah. Well, I hope it's kind of touching in a certain ways. And the other thing is like the way the shadow works. So the antagonist of the story is the shadow, and the way that works is every time you lose a scene, or every time you run out of spirit, the shadow sort of takes over, and it sort of feeds Luma with fear and doubt and sorrow and all of these sort of more difficult emotions. Um, so that we haven't really touched upon that, but it's really it everything to this game has this sort of light versus dark, and the wolf versus the bear, and the Luma and versus the shadow kind of vibe to it that constantly flows and flows and flows. So I think that's the only thing I wanted to mention is Brom, and the shadow, because without the shadow, this game is a breeze, and it's not a breeze.
No,
It's
it's
not a
not.
breeze. I have a hard time playing it. Not
Yeah,
playing it, but I have a hard time winning.
Yeah,
I
I'm like, it's easy to play, it's hard to win. After
yeah,
the prologue, I even was like, oh, I
no,
need to go back. Like after my first play, I still needed to go back and redo all of the scenes to try and beat it. So
it's good. It teaches you how to play as you play, which I think is it teaches you the correct way to play as you play, which I think
yeah.
is a great thing of the game. Okay, so last thing I want to mention before we close off, we had a very astute member on our blog, Brandon, was mentioned that the title, this is what he said, the title makes the game sound like it could be a whole new line or game system. Is this intentional? I could imagine it lead to, a whole Storyfold series where each game is a new adventure / story. Looks amazing though. So he mentioned Storyfold. We have hopes and dreams, and obviously it rests on us doing a good job this first time. But we plan on Wildwoods being the first game in a system of games. Being the Storyfold games. We think there's a lot of fun narrative to explore, a lot of fun worlds to dive into. I imagine Luma and Brahm might not be done yet, but there's a lot of space for us. Obviously, what we're kind of focused on is designing a really good core system, and establishing a lot of things that could be hallmarks of a Storyfold series. And really, I think I have a feeling that this could kind of help push the kind of the solo single player board game experience further. I think we've been seeing that a lot in the past couple of years. Games like Final Girl and others are really kind of elevating single player solo board games to the next level, and I think Storyfold's going to come alongside and do that as well. And it kind of couples onto Eric had a comment just come through about the development cycle. How long do you expect the development cycle will be for the game? When is the expected release date? I know that things might change, might happen. So we're Sjoerd and the team, they're currently on pace. So game has 5 chapters. I think you just wrapped up the 4th gameplay development chapter, correct?
yeah, yeah.
And so you have the 5th one to do. We have polish and artwork and a bunch of stuff to go. Our artist is chugging away, I think, through the chapter 2 scenes right now, and then we'll be starting chapter 3 scenes in a couple weeks. Our tentative plan is to we're launching in the fall, and we want this to be available around this time next year. So we want to deliver in summer 2025. And, ideally it's, I don't know if we'll be at Essen, but ideally if we are at Essen, you can purchase it at Essen, you can, purchase it at Gen Con, and, it'll be available then. So that's where we're at for development. The team has been doing a fantastic job, just kind of pushing things forward. So I'm really excited. Great. Any last words?
I have one more question from Instagram. I'm not sure if we actually have this, but also going to butcher the name. Le Jeu de Vince. I'm from Canada. I should know how to say French things properly. But anyways, they asked any broad idea on the price range. I know it's still far out.
Yeah, great. It'll be less expensive than any game we have ever made.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although that bar's pretty high.
I thought so too. Yeah.
That bar is pretty high. No, we're gonna save the price point. We think it's a great price, a great value. And then if you want to bling out your copy, obviously the deluxe version will be a bit more, but still I think a great value for what you're getting.
Yeah, I think it'll be the most accessible game for other people to jump into, price range and just playability of it as well, that we've done so far. I think like all of our games are so different as well, so there's something for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Hey,
Cool.
Thanks so much for being here, Sjoerd. And
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, we're excited. You'll hear a lot more from him in the coming months as we lead up to our crowdfunding campaign. And thank you all for being excited and hopefully back in the game. Well, hopefully first you enjoy the game and then back it and all that stuff. So great.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
Yep. So thank you guys for showing up to this episode of All About Games. And then we will be back to our regular schedule for the podcast where we do our episodes the first Friday of every month. So we will see you in September for that. Otherwise, I think everybody's said what they're going to say for now, until the Kickstarter, of course. But yeah. All right. So we'll see you guys all next time. And thanks for showing up and asking questions. So bye.
See you.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Owl About Games, a board game podcast brought to you by Open Owl Studios. You can catch us on the first Friday of every month. I've been your host, Natalie, and I'm co-hosted by Brendan. And that's a wrap on this episode. See you next month.